You know that feeling. Wanting to really get something complex, but without, like, spending days researching.
Yeah, finding that shortcut to real understanding.
Exactly. And today, we're tackling something that seems simple on the surface, but is incredibly deep. The halakha-compliant mikvah.
A ritual bath, but with layers upon layers of meaning and rules.
Right. We're diving into some great sources. You shared some PDF notes, observations from a Torah lecture.
The goal is to pull out the really key stuff for you, the most interesting bits about what makes a mikvah properly kosher.
Kind of like giving you that aha moment on this important practice. So let's start basic. What is a mikvah, fundamentally? And why is it such a big deal?
Okay, so a mikvah is a Jewish ritual bath. Its main purpose is purification.
Purification. Not just getting clean, though.
No, it's more of a spiritual concept. It's absolutely essential in Halakha Jewish law. It's not just optional.
And it's used for?
Several key things. Primarily, the laws of family purity, Taharat Hamishpacha, which you find outlined way back in Leviticus.
Leviticus, okay.
Also for conversions to Judaism, and for achieving ritual purity before holidays, or sometimes even before deep Torah study.
So this goes way back. It's not like a later rabbinic thing.
Well, absolutely not. The roots are right there in the Torah. Leviticus 11.36 mentions a gathering of water. The word used is actually mikvah, and says it remains pure.
Wow.
And get this, the priority given to it in Jewish law is, well, pretty stunning. Some sources say building a mikvah takes precedence even over building a synagogue.
Seriously? Over a synagogue?
Seriously, it tells you something profound about how central this idea of ritual readiness and purity is.
That really puts it in perspective. Okay, so if it's that important, getting it right must be crucial. What are the absolute must-haves for a mikvah to be, compliant?
Right. There are several core requirements. Let's start with the water itself.
Okay.
It has to be naturally collected water. Think rainwater, melted snow, maybe spring water, but collected directly.
Directly, what does that mean?
It means the initial water, the core water, can't be what's called meimim, shuv, and drawn water.
Drawn water, like carried in buckets.
Or even flowing through certain kinds of pipes before it gets into the mikvah pit. That's a big no-no for the initial collection. It can invalidate the whole thing.
Why such a strict rule? What's the idea behind that?
Well, the thought is that the water needs to maintain its connection to its natural source, like the heavens or the earth. Human intervention, carrying it in vessels before it's gathered in the mikvah structure, kind of breaks that direct link.
Interesting, like keeping it pure, untampered with at the source.
Exactly. It connects the ritual to something primal, something elemental.
Makes sense. What else is essential? Volume.
Yes, volume is critical. A kosher mikvah needs a minimum of 40 seah of this natural water.
40 seah. How much is that, roughly?
It translates to approximately 200 gallons, or about 750 liters. Enough to fully immerse an adult body.
Okay, sizable. And the construction?
It needs to be built into the ground or be a structure that's essentially immovable, part of the building, and it absolutely must be watertight. No leaks allowed.
Right. And I've heard about designs with, like, two pools side by side.
Ah, yes, that's very common, especially for rainwater mikvahs. You often have two connected pools.
What are they for?
One is the bor harain, that's the reservoir where the natural rainwater collects. The other is the bor hatvila, the pool where people actually immerse.
And they have to be connected?
Yes, connected in a specific halakhic way. So the sanctity of the natural water in the bor harain extends to the water in the bor hatvila.
How do they do that?
There are two main methods. One is called hashaka, which means kissing. There's a hole connecting the two pools, allowing the water levels to touch.
Kissing water, huh?
It's a nice image, isn't it?
Oh.
The other method is zeria, which involves a process where water from the immersion pool is mingled with the rainwater reservoir in a specific way. Both achieve that vital connection.
Fascinating. Any other rules about the water itself?
Yes, very important. The water for immersion must be still, stationary, not flowing like a river or coming from a shower head.
So no immersing in a flowing river.
Generally, that presents halakhic issues for the primary obligation, though it can sometimes be permissible under specific circumstances or for different purposes. But for standard mikveh use, it needs to be collected, still water.
Got it. And the immersion itself?
It has to be complete. The entire body all at once under the water. And there can't be any barriers chattitzat between the person and the water.
Like what kind of barriers?
Clothes, jewelry, bandages, even significant dirt or grime. The person needs to be clean and completely bare.
And intent matters.
Absolutely. The immersion must be done with the specific intention, the kavana, for ritual purification.
Okay, so let's be crystal clear. What definitely does not count as a mikvah immersion.
Right. Steam or vapor is out. A sauna or steam room doesn't fulfill the requirement at all. It has to be liquid water.
No misty purification.
No. And, as we said, if the initial collection relies on drawn water, meim shuvin, that generally invalidates it. Heating the rainwater before it's properly collected and connected is also usually problematic.
Okay, that covers the core requirements pretty well. Now, let's shift to history a bit. You mentioned the listener's sources talked about the Prophet Ezra instituting the mikvah. How does that fit with the Torah origins?
That's a really good question, and the distinction is important. The concept of ritual immersion in water is definitely biblical. It's right there in Leviticus, as we discussed.
So Ezra didn't invent it out of thin air?
No, not at all. Ezra the scribe, Ezra HaSefer, was a pivotal figure during the return from Babylonian exile in the early Second Temple era. He didn't invent the mikvah, but he played a huge role in, let's say, institutionalizing it and expanding its regular use.
How so? What did he change or emphasize?
Well, tradition, particularly in the Talmud, credits Ezra with enacting several decrees, takanot, to strengthen Jewish observance. One famous one was requiring men who'd had a seminal mission to immerse in a mikveh before studying Torah or praying,
So adding a layer beyond the basic Torah law.
kind of reinforcing a level of sanctity for those activities. He also really re-emphasized the laws of family purity and the necessity of immersion for converts. So think of it like this. The foundation is the Torah, but Ezra helped build up the structure, making mikveh use more widespread and central to daily religious life after the exile.
That makes a lot more sense. Foundation in Torah reinforced and expanded by Ezra.
Precisely.
Okay, let's get practical again.
Yeah.
What if someone, like our listener perhaps, is considering building a mikvah on their own private property? What's involved? Sounds complicated.
Oh, it is. And this is crucial. It's not a DIY project. Seriously. The halakhic details are incredibly complex.
So step one is?
Step 1, 2, and 3 are consult the experts. You absolutely need guidance from a qualified persek, a halakhic decizer who specializes in mikvah laws, and also an experienced mikvah builder or architect.
No shortcuts there.
None. But talking general principles, you'd likely be looking at that two-pool system we discussed, the rainwater reservoir, bor harain, and the immersion pool for hatvila.
Connected by kissing or mingling.
Exactly, hashaka or zaria. And the system for collecting the rainwater needs careful design. You need kosher piping pipes that don't render the water drawn before it reaches the reservoir.
Kosher piping, okay. What about keeping the water usable? Clean, warm?
Good question. You can, and generally do, have filtration and heating systems for the immersion pool, the bor hatvila.
Ah, but only for that pool.
Yes, and critically, these systems are added after the halakhic requirements are met, after the natural water is collected in the bor harain, and the proper connection between the pools is established. You can heat and filter the water people actually use, but the core sanctity comes from that untouched natural water.
That's a key distinction. Does the location's climate matter much?
Oh, definitely. A rainy climate is obviously a big advantage. Consistent rainfall makes collecting the necessary natural water much easier.
Like the listener's pine forest location sounds ideal for rain.
It does sound promising for supply. In drier areas, it's more challenging. You need much larger reservoirs, maybe rely on snowmelt if applicable, and if deemed halakhically sound by the posek.
Could you use, say, lake water or spring water if you live near it?
Potentially. Still, spring water collected correctly might work, but again, requires expert halakhic approval. Rivers and lakes are generally tricky because the water needs to be stationary, collected, not flowing.
Got it. So focusing on the listener's specific case, this rainy pine forest mikvah idea, what unique things pop out?
Well, the rain is a huge plus, obviously. A roof and gutter system feeding the bor hagavia, another term for a rainwater collection pool, is straightforward. The pines might offer privacy and maybe some insulation.
Sounds nice, but I'm guessing pine needles could be an issue.
A big issue. You'd need meticulous filtering or screening before the water even hits the reservoir to keep out needles, leaves, and other debris. Constant maintenance.
Right. What else in a forest setting?
You'd need to really check the soil, ensure good drainage so the structure isn't sitting in marshy ground. The bor hagavia itself, underground, totally waterproof, minimum 40 seah, and covered securely.
And the immersion pool.
The bor hatvila would be connected, likely heated given a potentially cool forest climate, and you'd need a well-designed preparation area, showers, changing space, safe, accessible paths, especially if there's snow or ice sometimes.
Materials. Something that fits in.
You could use natural stone or properly treated wood for the exterior to blend in. Inside, non-slip tiles are essential for safety. It sounds like a really thoughtful project, especially sharing the design ideas publicly like the listener did.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, let's switch gears slightly to the legal side. Building this privately, especially maybe where there isn't a big Jewish community or the public mikvah nearby, how do you justify that legally, say, to local authorities in the U.S.?
That's where religious freedom protections come in. In the U.S., you have the First Amendment guaranteeing free exercise of religion.
Right.
And then there's a federal law, RLUIPA, the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act.
RLUIPA. Okay, what does that do?
It provides pretty strong protection against zoning or land use laws that impose a substantial burden on religious exercise, unless the government has a really compelling reason and uses the least restrictive means.
So how does a private mikvah fit into that?
The argument is that for an observant Jew, having access to a kosher mikvah isn't optional. It's often a religious necessity for core practices like family purity laws.
So not having one is a substantial burden.
Exactly. If there's no communal mikvah available, preventing someone from building a private, non-commercial one on their property could definitely be argued as a substantial burden on their religious practice.
Especially if it's small scale.
Right. A private mikveh is often comparable in size and impact to a small swimming pool or a cistern. It typically doesn't create noise, traffic, or significant utility demands, particularly if it uses rainwater.
So the argument to the town would be,
You'd emphasize the religious mandate, its centrality, maybe even mentioning the priority over a synagogue, the constitutional and RLUIPA protections, the minimal public impact, and its status as a religious necessity in an underserved area. It's a small, private structure for essential religious observance.
sounds like a strong case, grounded in both religious need and legal rights.
It generally is, yes. It's about showing it's a fundamental need that doesn't unduly impact the community.
Wow. We have really covered a lot of ground. From the basic definition to the nitty-gritty of construction and legal justifications, it's amazing how much goes into this.
It really is. It highlights that deep connection in Judaism between law, ritual, and very practical physical realities. Water, earth, structure, it all has to come together in just the right way.
A simple act of immersion, but built on such a detailed foundation.
Exactly.
So for you listening, as you think about all this detail, maybe consider the enduring power of tradition and ritual. How practices like mikvah immersion, requiring such specific care, continue to hold deep meaning for people today. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other everyday practices or rituals, maybe ones you don't even think about, might have similarly profound and detailed histories or requirements hidden just beneath the surface? Something to ponder.
Definitely. And please, if this sparked more questions or you want to explore any part of this further, keep the conversation going. Learning is always a journey.